For ages, I've been thinking it would be a nice, interesting, easy video for me to take loads of questions online about my experiences working on Dishonored 2 as a senior level designer and just answer them really quickly in a video like this. Here we go. Question 1 is, as a level designer on Dishonored, do you design for stealth or combat first? It's definitely stealth first. The reason is that stealth is a much more complicated and kind of layout dependent and fragile thing to design for than combat in Dishonored. The combat, it's kind of designed in such a way that it can take place anywhere and be okay generally, so long as the enemies can reach you and stuff like that. Whereas stealth gameplay is really layout dependent, and if you don't design it kind of thoughtfully, then it can just fall apart really badly and not work at all. So you have to think about stealth first, really. I think that's the main thing you have to think about. And then, frankly, whenever you design a stealth situation, it can break out into combat if you get spotted, and it's probably going to work. You know, you might have to tweak a few things with combat in mind, but generally, stealth is the thing you'd have to put most of your thought into, and especially first. Question 2. What was your biggest holy shit moment seeing someone doing something or solving something in a way you didn't even know was possible? For sure, the biggest surprise for me was when I saw speedrunners do it on YouTube. Seeing what speedrunners can do in games is just mind-blowing every time. They're always exploiting bugs that not only did you not know about them, but you don't even understand how they could work, even when you know about them. I've seen people finish the Dust District in a matter of, I think, seconds. And so speedrunners are definitely the most bonkers thing I've ever seen when it comes to people playing my levels. Question number 3. Did you guys get the idea of time travel in Stilton's mansion, or the transforming building, from Titanfall 2, or did they get it from you? Yeah, so in case you don't know, in Titanfall 2, very much like Dishonored 2, there's a special level that involves time travel, and you flipping between two kind of timelines in the same place, and another special mission which involves a lot of transforming building architecture stuff. And these two games came out quite closely together. I think maybe within a few months of each other. So it's quite a funny coincidence. And I remember playing Titanfall 2 while I was at Arkane and wondering if people at Respawn were playing Dishonored 2 a few months down the line and thinking about how we did very similar things. I do think it's a total coincidence because these levels get designed and conceived months and years before you ever see them in a released game. And ultimately, I think it's the product of, it's what happens basically when you have, if you look at the similarities between Arkane making Dishonored 2 and Respawn making Titanfall 2, you have two AAA teams that have made very level design driven games. Early on, there would be meetings where it's like, okay, what awesome levels can we do in the sequel? You'll get level designers suggesting things like, well, it'd be cool if there was some kind of time travel thing going on. Or wouldn't it be cool if the level kind of changed around you and you're kind of jumping off all these walls, or you're stopping time and blinking through into the inner workings of the building and stuff like this. It's just the kind of thing that level designers would pitch after a successful game like Dishonored 1 or Titanfall 1. And so I think it's a total coincidence, but there's reasons behind why it would happen like that. Question 4. Would you rather live in Dunwall or Karnaca? Dunwall for me. Dunwall is basically based on places like London and Edinburgh in the UK, whereas Karnaca is much more of a kind of Southern European thing. And as a result, Karnaca sounds really hot and sweaty to me, and I'm more used to Dunwall and England's kind of miserable cold, and all of the ways that a place can be corrupt and horrible and dingy. I'm kind of used to the British way of being all of those things. And so Karnaca sounds like a nice place to go on holiday, and then I'll go back to home in Dunwall. Back to the rats. Question 5. Why is the game so easy, in brackets, guns blazing? I don't really feel the need to be stealthy in Dishonored. Don't get me wrong, I still love the game, I just expect more of a challenge. This is an interesting one, as a question about like the challenge and the difficulty of Dishonored, and my answer is always that it's actually really important to me that Dishonored isn't a super challenging game at its core. There's this thing, I've been meaning to make a video about it, something I heard Harvey say, Harvey Smith, the creative director of Dishonored 2, in a comment on a Rock Paper Shotgun article about immersive sims a long time ago. He talked about this idea of time limits being the enemy of exploration. And what he means there is that if you put too much pressure on the player, they will stop thinking in an exploratory kind of experimental way, and they'll just look for the kind of quickest, easiest solution. That isn't the mindset that you want Dishonored players to be in. The whole game is about trying to encourage players to experiment and come up with cool ways of solving problems and combining their abilities in interesting ways. And so to encourage the player to do that, you got to give them some space to kind of be able to feel like they can breathe and think and experiment and explore, instead of like forcing them with a gun on their head to kind of finish the level really quickly or do everything they can to just survive this fight because they're getting massacred. Right? You can't do that. And so very broadly, I think that's a reason why Dishonored is, in some ways, given all the powers you have, not very hard in terms of simply finishing the level. But Dishonored also gives you loads of room to kind of opt in into difficult ways of playing the game. You know, it establishes morality and chaos as a thing in the game. And if you want the game to be harder and you want to show how good you are at it, and especially through the lens of it being a stealth game, then you can try playing it in a non-lethal way instead of going guns blazing. And you can try and play the non-lethal way as a ghost and never let anybody see you. That's super hard, right? And so Dishonored can be an extremely difficult and hardcore game, but it's up to the player to kind of opt into those challenges. And I think that approach is necessary to allow most players by default to have a kind of more exploratory, creative, experimental mindset when playing the game. Because if it was too hard, players would just desperately try and survive their way through the level and finish things, rather than explore it and see everything that's interesting about it. Question 6. How heavily did the devs factor in all the different ways that players might play the levels? There are always loads of ways, and this seems like it would be a nightmare for the team. Yeah, well, so on one hand, yes, it is a lot of work to think about all the different things that the player can do in levels and design the levels so that you can do lots of different things in them. But if you work at Arkane and you're working on a game like Dishonored, then you know that's the whole point of the game. And you're always thinking in that mindset from day one. And so doing that isn't as hard as it would be on a really linear, different kind of game. You know, for example, if you were working on a Call of Duty game, and then you decided within the context of that game to try and make a level where you could play it in hundreds of different ways, that would be way harder because the game itself is not designed to support that kind of gameplay. And so you'd be kind of brushing up against and pushing and pulling against what the game naturally is, trying to make it into a really non-linear thing. Whereas Dishonored, everything about it, from the gameplay to the way it's coded to the story and everything, is designed to be this malleable, non-linear thing. So on one hand, yes, it's hard to make that kind of game and to think about all the possibilities. But on the other hand, it's doable if you set out with the team knowing that's the goal from day one. Question 7. Did you have any ideas for other levels that never made it into the game? When I arrived at Arkane, the idea for the Dust District was already in place. All the other levels in the game, I think, were assigned to level designers. So there wasn't room for me to pitch levels and stuff. I do remember around the time when we knew that the DLC would be you playing as Megan, or Billy Lurk in Dishonored 1, reuniting with Dowd, and I had this idea for a mission where Dowd would send you to assassinate another member of the gang that he kind of raised in Dishonored 1. And yeah, you'd have to go to the hideout of another member of this gang that was trained in the same way as you by Dowd. And he knows that you're coming, and because he was trained by Dowd too, he knows how you work, and he knows your techniques and that kind of thing. So I imagine this mission where you're infiltrating a base, but whenever you go through these kind of sneaky routes and high positions and stuff like that, you would find notes and recordings from him where he's kind of mocking you because he knows you would have gone there. He knows that you always take the sneaky route and all this kind of thing. And no matter how sneaky you are, you feel like he might be onto you. He might be one step ahead of you. I thought this would be a really cool mission and could create a really interesting kind of dialogue between the level and the player, because in a way, this character who has designed all these traps and these notes for you, knowing that you're going to go there, it's kind of making them a bit like the level designer. In the same way that in Dishonored 1, or in Dishonored in general, the outsider is a bit like a game designer, playing with all the characters and saying, okay, what would you do if I gave you these powers? To Corvo and Emily. In this mission, this target would be a bit like a level designer toying with the player, saying like, well, I knew you'd go there. That's why I've designed it like that. So I just thought that could be really cool, but I never really got to pitch it because there was already a story in mind for the DLC, trying to kind of wrap up the thing with the outsider and stuff like that. What else? Question 8. How do you ensure the game both looks realistic and works as a video game? Did you start with building an unrealistic, gamey level and then make it more realistic? Or did you begin with designing a realistic place and then adding the game elements? I wouldn't say it's either one of those. I don't think you can just start with like a purely gamey thing and then turn it into a realistic looking thing. And I don't think it would be very wise. I think it would be a nightmare from a level design perspective to try and take a super realistic thing and then just turn it into a Dishonored level. In reality, I think from day one, you've got to be thinking about when you see the concept art and you know what the world is supposed to look like, and because it's a sequel, you know what the kind of level design you're supposed to be doing, you're immediately always just thinking about, okay, what parts of the realistic part of this world, what aspect of the architecture and stuff like that, what version of that works for the game? And how can I focus in on that? And how can I kind of communicate that to the artist and try and bring those aspects of the art into the level? Because, you know, you've got to try and find the stuff that works for the game and filter it through that lens. And make sure you don't fall into this trap of having a really realistic level that is just a nightmare to make a Dishonored level out of. And you know, there definitely were challenges with that with the Dust Districts, but that's just part of the job to try and figure out how to make that work. Often, as a level designer, I would pitch some ideas that were kind of maybe 60 or 70% gameplay focused with a bit of an eye towards a believable environment, to then show to an artist who is doing the opposite, who's trying to make something that generally looks good but hopefully works as a level. And then, you know, you try and find some compromise and kind of happy mediums in the middle, or ideally amazing solutions that work for both, you know. Question 9. How do you normally play games, and does that affect how you design levels like what you did in Dishonored 2? What can I say? I'm a really like fussy, impatient, slightly jaded player these days. There's loads of games I don't play, and I'm fussy about which ones I do play. And when I do play games, I really want them to be good and interesting quite quickly. I want to play short, interesting, high-quality games. And so I think one way that attitude kind of affects my level design is that I like levels to be really tight and rich and not waste the player's time and not kind of repeat really generic stuff all the time and stuff you've done in loads of other games. You know, I really want to focus on what's interesting about a level and a game and just kind of cut out everything else and just keep it really focused and, you know, high quality. And so I tend to design spaces and levels that are a bit smaller than other level designers might do, I think. The Dust District is a good example of this, where most Dishonored levels, and especially Dishonored 2 levels, are very long, like really long. You travel really long distances in them, whereas the Dust District was designed to be quite small and circular, because of the two factions thing and the fact that you can play it in two completely different ways, going to that base first and then to this one, or vice versa. And I wanted players to be able to see the whole level in a way and be able to visualize what they were doing and how different the level is based on that. And also there's other factors, like the fact that you're often carrying the body of one of the bosses to the other base. Doing that over long distances isn't very fun. All Dishonored levels, when you have an objective to carry a body to somewhere, the trip is quite short because you're slow and restricted when you're carrying a body, and so it's not very fun to make really long routes. So that's just an example of how I tend to, for lots of reasons, make levels smaller and denser and richer if I can. Question 10. As a level designer, how did you tend to work with the environment/prop artists? Is there much back and forth during development, or is one side of things usually done first and then handed over to the other team? The simplest answer to this is that it's definitely not a case of the art team or the level design team just doing their version of the level and then throwing it over the wall and letting the other side finish it and then shipping it. Dishonored levels in particular, you are just impossible to do like that. You should never really do that on any game, in my opinion. The collaboration between level design and art should always be a proper collaboration where you work together, but especially for Dishonored, where the level design and gameplay needs are so specific and complex, and the art needs are so high quality and specific, yeah, there's no way you could just do one side and then throw it over to the other side. Arkane was the first company I worked at where the level designer and the level architect, which is what we called the artists who worked on the levels, those two people sat next to each other in pairs based on the mission they were working on, so that they were literally talking every day like a married couple, stuck together, having to figure things out together. Because, yeah, that's how it's got to be. So loads of collaboration. Question 11. How many iterations of your level were there, roughly? I mean, I don't know how to answer this because I worked on the Dust District for most of my time on the project, which was about 3 years. So let's say I worked on it for 2.5 years. In that time, I don't know how you would count how many iterations it went through. All I can say is that it wasn't a matter of like one huge first pass of it and then a second pass and it was done. It was more like dozens and hundreds of smaller changes over the course of 2 or 3 years. So it's just, I don't even know how to put a number on how many iterations there were, but it was lots. Question 12. How do you start designing a Dishonored level from scratch? 2 things here. I've made a video about how I often design levels in text first, and I did do this for the Dust District. I didn't design the whole thing in sequence because it's still, it's meant to be like any Dishonored level. It should be a very non-linear thing. But I remember designing in text lots of little ideas for vignettes and scenes in the level, different parts of it like modules that would fit together to create the level that the player can experience in lots of different ways. Another little thing about how I designed it from scratch is that I didn't really design it from scratch. I was given very high level constraints about what the level was supposed to be when I first started at Arkane, and I worked within those constraints. The key ones being that this level was supposed to be about making a choice between 2 factions and it taking place in a place called the Dust District, which is named so because of the environmental problems and dust storms that occur there because of the Duke working the mines too hard. So I had a narrative conceit and a gameplay conceit to work with, and I took it from there. Question 13. Was it an early decision to make each level have something really unique in it, like the glass shard in Stilton's mansion, the dust storms in the Dust District, the Clockwork Mansion, etc.? Or did these elements come organically from the level design process? So there's often a kind of very high level question of whether a game's levels are brainstormed first as cool ideas for levels, and then you come up with a story to fit those levels, or whether you come up with a story first and then you make the levels to fit that story. Both of those approaches make sense in different cases, but for Dishonored 2, I suspect that it was a level design first thing. I think they approached that project with like, okay, well, we're going to go even harder on the level design this time, and let's come up with some really high concept, cool, ambitious ideas for level design. And then we'll find a story to fit it. I suspect it was that, because I think it would be hard to do it the other way around and achieve the kind of level design you have in Dishonored. Question 14. Was the Howler gang originally meant to be all throughout the game, or just limited to the Dust District? I can say with reasonable certainty that the Howler gang would never have been designed just for the Dust District. And that's purely because creating all the assets and the stuff for the Howler gang is not a small amount of work. It's loads of characters, kind of highly detailed characters that all have to be concepted out, loads of voice acting, all this kind of stuff. You'd be kind of mad to do all of that just for one level in the game. And so even though I wasn't there during pre-production, I can't imagine that the Howlers were ever meant to just be for one mission. I also know that Paolo's special ability to resurrect once per day in the game, which happens in the Dust District, and also in the other mission that he's involved in that I can't remember the name of, Paolo has a special ability where he can resurrect once a day, and I know that I heard from Harvey that part of the reasoning behind that ability was to enable Paolo to survive beyond one mission. Because one of the classic problems you have with immersive sims when you meet important characters is that there's always the question of, well, what if the player just pulls out their sword or their gun and just kills them, right? If they're dead, does that mean we can't do any quests later in the game that depend on them being alive? So somebody, maybe Harvey, came up with the idea of a character having a resurrect ability that would mean that you can kill them in one mission and they would still be back for a later mission. And this simply is useful to allow key characters to spend more time in the game and on screen. because that's often a super valuable, that's like gold dust to game developers. Like character time on screen where they're actually doing story stuff is often very rare. So it's useful to find ways to maximize characters' on-screen time. So yeah, I'm fairly sure that the Howlers were never intended to just be in that one mission. Final question. Shall we gather for whiskey and cigars? Only people who have played Dishonored 1 will understand this, but indeed, I believe so.
Should we gather for whiskey and cigars tonight? Indeed, I believe so.
So yeah, I hope it was interesting. Let me know what you think of my answers and if you have any other questions in the comments. And yeah, cheers for watching as always. See ya.